Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome back to the Once and Orphan podcast. My name is Jasmine. Joining me today is Miss Sabrina. So, for those of you who have been with me for just a short minute, you know that we started talking about the topic of adoption and foster care. And so then we just started speaking to people in general who had a story to tell and wanted to share their stories. And so today we're going to circle back around to the topic of adoption and foster care. Miss Sabrina joining me today is another adoptee, born to a black woman and a white man, but adopted by a white family. So, with that in itself, there's always a story because so many of us want to change the narrative. So many of us feel like, oh, that's fine. So many of us feel like absolutely not. But Sabrina, who has a lived experience, is going to talk to us today about her adoption experience as a black or mixed race child growing up in a white family. Hi, Sabrina. Thank you for joining me.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Now, Sabrina, we've already chatted it up and we've already discussed that you are now. Do you call yourself black or do you call yourself mixed race?
I normally say biracial and I do say black, but I have gotten a lot of other people who will say, well, you're not black, you're biracial. So, I just say like woman of color or
Gotcha.
biracial. I think I'm black, because, at the end of the day, when the palm skin people get mad, they going to throw around slurs just like, everybody else. So I don't
Right.
do that blood quantum stuff.
Right. And you're within your right to identify as a black woman. You were born to your biological mother was a black woman. And so anyway,
Yes.
so Sabrina, how old were you when you were placed in foster care, placed for adoption?
I was placed up for adoption at birth, and I wasn't adopted until I was 3 months old.
3 months. And this is by the family who
Yes,
raised you. So
the Davises.
now, Sabrina, we talked and you didn't have like the best adoption experience,
No,
right?
ma'am.
When you had that adoption experience, do you know if they considered you white or black or mixed race?
Biracial.
They did. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you think that had a lot to do with how they treated you?
No, because I had three other adoptive siblings that she adopted first, and they were white, and she mistreated them equally just as much the same. I think that she was just a sick, sadistic woman. I don't understand why, if you're racist, you would adopt a biracial child, but I think it was that white savior complex of look at me, I saved this, poor little black baby, and that's just kind of how I feel about it because she would, one day I would be her little sweet Suzie Q because that's what she called me. And the next day I was just another N word and she was going to trade me in for a white child is what she would threaten me with.
So
So,
she actually used the N
yes,
word.
ma'am.
So your adoptive mother was flat out calling you a nigger.
Yes, ma'am.
Huh. But take me back to Sabrina to when you first recalled like your first abusive experience with
I
Miss
don't
Davis.
remember it, but my brother actually, told me the story about it. He said I pretty much had a pretty good life from, baby up until 4 years old. And I had this doll and its hair would grow and it would get shorter if you moved its arms up and down. And I wanted to be like the doll, I guess. And I cut a chunk of my hair and I came into the living room flailing my arms up and down like my hair's not growing back like the doll. And as a mother, if my daughter did something like that, I would be like, oh, sweetheart, your hair's not like the dolls. It won't grow back, for a little bit. It doesn't grow like the dolls. It's going to take some time, but it's okay. We can fix your hair with a pretty bow. Like, and I would console my child. She shaved all of my hair off. And that wasn't the first time that she used my hair as punishment, but that was the first time of the major abuse was shaving my hair off at 4 years old because I cut my hair with a piece of scissors.
This is something that people would notice. People would absolutely notice a 4-year-old little girl walking around with no hair, and no one would say anything about it. It just makes me wonder
She
because
secluded us a lot from our family. So she actually adopted my brothers, Chris, Joey, and Beverly. They are biologically related. They were just adopted. She adopted them first, and then she adopted me. And on their first day coming home, at 5, 6, and 7 years old, you're excited to be in your new family. And the first day, because they were, excited, rambunctious children, she beat them. And my oldest brother, Chris, actually has clogged tear ducts. And because he couldn't cry, she beat him even harder because of that. So they were already experiencing abuse. And then, and they're much older than I am. Um, and, at 4, going through, that. And then it kind of just like my first incident of like actually remembering abuse would have been like 5 years old. I had experienced sexual abuse, at, by another peer at my, school. And, she had this, garage that she turned into a, bedroom, I guess, that she would rent out to strangers. She would put ads in the newspaper, and she would have strange people come and be like our nannies, and she would give them like partial rent discount if they would watch the kids so she could go do whatever she wanted. And I was getting abused by a few of our babysitters as well. So, or board attendants.
I just, what makes you invite strange people into your home and then watch your children? Did she ever have any biological children of her own? Obviously not.
No, she told us stories that she did, and she would drive us past cemeteries and tell us that that was where her, stillborn babies were. And later on, my siblings, when they got older, they actually drove to those cemeteries, and it turns out that was just somebody else's grave, and she was lying. So, which I want to say, just because you're infertile and you can't have children does not mean that you're guaranteed a child by somebody else. Nobody owes you a child. You know what I mean? We are not, as adoptees, the cure for someone's infertility. And if that is your sole purpose of adopting, to fulfill your need for infertility, you're adopting for the wrong reasons.
So many people are conflicted with that, right? Because there are children who are being placed for adoption by their biological families. So in a sense, it's kind of like, well, what do we do with these children? What is the solution to, housing these children and giving them a family? So as a result, we have the adoption system, the flawed, and I mean completely flawed adoption system. And then we have those who feel like, no, just let me grow up on my own, because I should not be placed with people who, one, don't know me, who will probably not properly care for me. So then what is the solution? So many are conflicted by that. And it raises a lot of concerns, because that's the thing. I can't conceive a child, but I want a baby. So what do I do? That is a very sensitive and a very tough subject. Now, Miss Davis obviously had a husband,
Yes.
Mr. Davis. Then what was he like? I mean, I just find
He
it odd that these people, she could be the abusive one, and then did he condone her behavior?
he didn't do anything about it. There was times where he would stand in front of us, like her and I, and he would take the hit for us. You got to understand, he was, Baptist, independent fundamental Baptist. So he grew up in very religious upbringing, and you just did not divorce. And I think he was just a weak man that didn't know how to stand up to his wife and get his children out of that situation. And I loved him, but I wish he would have stood up for what was right. But I will say this, that when my sister was sent away, and we'll eventually get to this part, to the program, she got sent away, and then I got sent away. And when they found out she was being abused, he actually came and got me. So he did try to get me out of those programs, but I also think that he was on the spectrum, because he would sit there and he would rock. And I remember him just handing his paychecks over. They didn't even sleep in the same bedroom. I think he also had Stockholm syndrome, so he had mental issues. He tried to commit suicide a couple times. So, but I'll just like start from the beginning so you can get the full thing, so we're not
Yeah,
jumping around. So,
sure, it's fine.
um, my biological mother had 4 children that she placed up for adoption or kinship adoption. So the first child she had, her name was Renisha, and she gave her to her sister. And that aunt wasn't paying attention, and she was crossing the street, and got hit by a car while trying to get ice cream from an ice cream truck. She was 7 years old. Then she had my brother, and she put him up for adoption. His adoptive parents died. He got put in the foster care system and pretty much went from the foster care system to the prison pipeline.
Mm.
And then she had my other sister B, and a cousin of ours took her in and raised her, even though it wasn't like a legal adoption. She didn't get adopt her until she was an adult legally. And then she went to Florida and she met my father, and they were running together, and she got pregnant with me, and she disappeared, put me up for adoption, came back to Jacksonville. He's like, "Where's the baby? Where have you been?" She's like, "Oh, I had a little girl. She died from heart complications. She's buried in Georgia somewhere." So my father never went looking for me because he thought I had died. And my adoptive mother was extremely abusive, and we would sleep in, she had a bathtub that was pink, and it was like the pink tile, and we would sleep in that when we would get in trouble, and it would be moldy, no blanket, no pillow. She'd spray us in the water, in the face with cold water, make us sleep in hallways, kick us in the head, rib, arms when she walked past that hallway. She was kicking my brothers out at 9 and 10 years old and was reporting them as runaways. Um, Several different things. She was just really abusive and sadistic with her punishments. And I did not feel love, but I wanted to love her, but I think she was incapable of love. But that was the only thing I knew of a mother. So when I was 9 years old, she got cancer. And so I went to go live with a family friend named Connie, and I was told to call her Aunt Connie, and she was a Black woman. And I loved living with her because I got to live with people who looked like me. And then I started getting sexually abused by one of her sons, and she came and picked me up, my adopted mother, and sent me to go live with a first cousin that I was, again, told to call Aunt. And from there, I lived with her for a few months, and she sent me away to a independent fundamental Baptist boarding school for troubled girls in Milton, Florida when I was 11 years old. I came home from school. She told me that I was going to go to a boarding school and I was going to be with my sister Beverly, and that's where she had sent her. So I went willingly thinking like, "Oh my gosh, Hogwarts, and I'm going to be with my sister." But when I got there, expecting to see a familiar face, my sister was nowhere to be found. They had placed her in their sister facility in Alice, Texas called Victory Acres. And um it's just something that she would do. She had a habit of this. Like, she started sending my brothers away. My brother Chris went to the famous Dozer School for Boys in Marianna, Florida. That school was open for 111 years, and they found 100 bodies, unmarked graves on the property. He had been in 10 different programs. And both my brothers went from adoption to the trouble teen industry to the prison pipeline,
Right.
joining gangs in prison for protection. They're both white. And I don't mean like joining Aryan gangs neither. So, you know what I mean? So
Right.
then that puts even a target if you're, siding with Black folks in prison, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
It's
um, but they had separated me and my sister. She was in the one in Alice, Texas. I was in the one in Milton, Florida. And they would, how these independent fundamental programs operate is, this was back in the 90s, so there really wasn't like big internet. They weren't using search engine optimization as much as they do now, but it was really word of mouth, and they would promote us at churches, have us go and sing at these churches, quote scripture, give our fake scripted testimonies, and talk about how these programs changed our life. And it was word of mouth, and that's how those programs operate. And that's similar to how pimps operate, by
yeah.
taking, from state to state to state. And so they won't really focus on education or like rehabilitation or even getting to the root of the problem. It was a one size fits all program, straight pure indoctrination.
Mm.
And we didn't have any kind of plans. I was mixed in with kids who were there for, sexual abuse, gangs, all kinds of things. And I just needed to be in a different loving home. I wasn't bad. I wasn't a trouble teen. I wasn't doing the things that my siblings were doing. And I'm not saying I was perfect or good. Did I talk back to my parents? Yes. But I was also reacting to my surroundings and my environment. And after a while, you keep beating a kid, being a kid, beating a kid, they're eventually going to fight back or try to speak up. And it was like right around the time when I was like understanding like this isn't normal and trying to speak out is when they got rid of me. They completely gaslit me when I would talk about the abuse that Mary put us through. My Aunt Sherry would be like, "You're lying, you're making that up, and you need to stop lying." And I wasn't lying. And so, I went to this program. I was there for about 3 months, and they had very strict rules on clothing. It was very much dressing like you were in the 60s. Our skirts to the ankle, no makeup, no nail polish. Red was a whore's color. If you got in trouble, you got on this punishment called red shirt, and all you wore was a red shirt or a red dress until you got off of that punishment. And they had a locked room that was carpeted from wall to wall, and it was called the prayer room. And a sign hung on the door. It said, "A praying girl will quit sinning and a sinning girl will quit praying." And they locked you in that room, and they would play preaching sermon tapes from Lester Roloff and all kinds of independent fundamental Baptist preachers, and pretty much brainwash you into submitting. And they would take all of your privileges away, like your right to shower. And then when you were allowed to shower, you were only allowed to use a bar of gold dial soap. Now, I am a biracial woman. I have extremely curly hair. It requires conditioning. And they gave me this flimsy comb and a rubber band, and my hair would get matted. And I was crying because I could not get these mats out. And I remember 2 girls sneaking me out of that room and conditioning my hair with cholesterol conditioner to help demat it. And they, had told the woman, like, "Hey, you can't, like, her hair's not like women's hair. It can't talk," like, you know what I mean? And they were Hispanic girls. So I remember getting so desperate for, I don't know, someone to just hear me. I would try to talk to other girls about what I went through. Like, you had a buddy system. So you had to stay with that buddy until you're off buddy system. You were not allowed to speak or talk. Now, I'm extremely ADHD, and I was 11. So name a child that doesn't talk a lot. And I would have questions, and I would, like, "I don't belong here. Where's my sister? I was told my sister is supposed to be here and she's not here." And I would get in trouble for talking. So they put me in this room, and I was there for like 2.5 months. And I remember trying to hang myself. They had this closet, and I didn't know it at the time, but it had a retractable rod, and I looped my shirt over it. And when I did, it fell, and they heard the boom and all came in there and, pieced together what I was trying to do. And they decided they were going to come in and exorcise my demons and pray over me. And the next day they put me in handcuffs, shackles, put me in a van with a bunch of other girls. I asked where we're going. They tell me to be quiet. We drive for a few hours, and I see this church sign that says Bethel Baptist Church. And I'm thinking, like, okay, well, maybe we're just like traveling to another church like how we normally do. But why am I in shackles? This is so weird. Did they think I was going to run away? Like, 11. Then we drive down this dirt road, and I see these barracks, and I see another sign that says Bethel Boys Academy. And I see shaved head boys with white t-shirts, camo pants, marching, drill sergeant. I'm like, okay, they're just trying to scare me. Like, like Jerry Springer when they would bring those and I'm like, they're not going to leave me here. This is a boys' school, and I'm a girl. And they left me there. As soon as I got off the van, I had a drill sergeant in my face. The director was in my face, yelling, spitting. They were like, "Oh, you're a runner, huh? You're a runner." And I was like, "I'm 11, 82 pounds. I've never ran away." And they're like, "You don't speak unless we give you permission to speak." And I'm sitting there thinking, like, okay, I can take this. Like, they're going to yell in my face, blah, 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 scare me. I'll go back to the girls' home and I'll be good. Because, that's
Right.
what I'm thinking. But no, they marched me inside the director's home. The van drives away and they leave me there. And I'm forced to do calisthenics that I've never done before, bends and thrusts, a bunch of push ups, all kinds of things. And I remember seeing another boy there that was being, punished outside, and he was rolling like up and down hills throwing up, and boys were screaming in his face. And I was like, well, I don't want them to have a bunch of boys attack me, so I'm going to do what they say. Like, that was the first time I was actually scared, because you have to understand, I never, other than sexual abuse, never experienced that kind of abuse from my father. So all my abuse was from females, you know? Um, and so that scared me.
Yeah, I mean, of course it would. That would scare anybody. I mean, you're 11 years old. You go from being in an abusive adoptive home to now being put in this system. Like, I'm now, my question is, what kept you from going to jail? Because this was the path that was set for you.
Right.
That was intended for you. What kept you out of jail?
Spite. They told me I was going to amount to nothing, that I was going to be a whore, I was going to end up like my mother on drugs. And I said, what? Like, I had dreams of being a journalist and a writer. Like, ever since I was 12, I knew I was going to write a book about my life. I swear one day Lifetime's going to make a movie about me, because I was like, nope, I'm going to prove you wrong. Like, you don't know anything about me. You're projecting onto me that I'm a bad kid. And I knew that I was not a bad kid. Did I do stuff that I messed up or talk back or whatever? Yes, but kids do that. You're supposed to guide them. Kids are
Right,
going to make mistakes. That doesn't mean you need to send them away to the
right,
trouble teen industry, to a bunch of strangers that were unqualified to take care of us. None of these people had any kind of licensure. They were not doctors. They were not therapists. Actually, the owner, Herman Fountain, was a drug addict, a recovered drug addict, narcissist who found God. And those are the worst type of people, narcissists who find God, because then you can't tell them nothing, you know? So I'm doing jumping jacks in his house, and he tells me that I need to smile, which I thought was really creepy and weird. So I'm
yeah,
like, okay, I'm gonna do whatever he says. Maybe he'll like let up. And then he did, and he was like, well, you have the opportunity to do something great with your life here. You're the first girl to arrive. And I'm like, first girl to arrive?
right, right,
He's like, yeah, we just reopened. This program got shut down. It started in 1978 or 1979. Herman Fountain Sr. actually worked for Lester Roloff in Corpus Christi, Texas. And so did the Walkdens that owned Charity Haven and Victory Acres. They all worked on this farm with him, where he had started a girls' home and a boys' home that battled so many battles with the state of Texas over licensure, child abuse, and etc. And so all the people that ran the programs that I went to all trained underneath Lester Roloff. It was a cult, essentially.
right.
And
Exactly.
and so, I have this former drug addict telling me about my life when I've never even done drugs. So I'm like, I'm better than you. I've never even done drugs. Like, how are you going to sit here and tell me because I um don't want to be abused by my parents anymore, like that I'm the problem? So he's telling me to smile. I smile, do what he asks. He's telling me about, like, yeah, you have an opportunity to be great. You could become a leader. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, I'm never going to be a leader and be forced to abuse other kids. Um, so I'm in this program, and I was the first girl to arrive. So it was a little bit different from how they ran the boys program. And at the time when I got there, we were allowed to wear regular clothing, but it wasn't like pants or jeans or anything, no secular music. Um, and I remember, because we didn't have that many girls, that they just had me work or cook in the kitchen and clean. And I had to clean Herman Fountain Sr.'s house. And he had 10 kids, and they were all named, except for the first one. He was Herman Fountain Jr., and everyone called him Bubba. He eventually ran the girls' school, but all of his other kids were named after people in the Bible. And I remember cleaning his daughter Esther's room, and the first thing I noticed was she had a huge poster on her wall of the Spice Girls, and I loved the Spice Girls. And I'm like, wait, how come she can listen to the Spice Girls, but I can't? And then I start folding her clothes, and I'm like, wait, she has shorts and a bathing suit. Why can't I have those things? You're sitting there. So that right away, I noticed the hypocrisy of how he raised his own children versus how we were,
Yeah.
what we were allowed to do. And so after like maybe a few weeks, maybe a few months, we started getting more girls in, and then it kind of got established as like a school, but it wasn't like a very big group of girls. We maybe had like 5 6 at the max, because we actually stayed in a trailer on the boys' property. And mind you, several boys tried sneaking into Esther Fountain's bedroom, doing things, peeping toms, and so that was really scary. So he
It
actually,
wasn't safe.
yeah, he bought property in Petal, Mississippi, and had the boys tear it down, like reconstruct it, and do everything. He was actually taking the boys off the property to go build churches. They built the house, they built the church on the property, they built the dormitory, and so it was actually a child labor camp, with Jesus thrown in the mix. He would
So
call the work crews nigger crews. And he actually, I didn't see this at the time when I was there. I didn't find out that the boys had to do this, because we didn't actually see it. But it wasn't until later on that I found out, when I found these guys who are now men, that they had to do this. But they actually had us picking cotton, not for money or profit, but purely for humiliation tactics. And at the time, I'm sitting there like, this is racist as hell. All I see is me and some Mexican girl out here picking cotton, and then they were actually having the boys do it too.
Sabrina, I want to touch on that just for a second because when we think of picking cotton, we think about the slavery days, right? We're going back centuries, but you're younger than me. And so give us, what year was this happening?
1998, sorry.
19,
1998 to 2000.
1998 to 2000. And they had children picking cotton.
They had boys holding on to fences, standing in puddles, and they called it riding the white lightning. And they would see how long they would last. They were drowning boys and resuscitating them. I remember having to watch the boys, and I actually have pictures of it. They would make them box for like sport, for staff entertainment. It was like Fight Club.
And you,
Sorry, I've told this story so many times, and I
no, no, no.
normally don't cry, but
Please don't apologize. We want pure authenticity. And I'm so sorry that this is actually your lived experience. This was your lived experience. And from 1998, we're fast forward 20 plus years, you're still affected by this.
I mean, imagine the first 18 years of your life, you saw nothing but extreme violence to children and to yourself. What that does to a child's developing brain. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah,
I'm like
absolutely.
amazed that I'm like still here.
Yeah. And that's why, oh gosh, I wish I could hug you right now. And that's why I asked what kept you out of jail. Because when a child is introduced to life through this type of trauma, they tend to lose it. And we don't see that side of, like, oh, we only see the bad side of the person, right? Oh, Sabrina's incarcerated because she did this. But we don't know what led up to Sabrina,
Yes.
being that way. And this came from trauma. This came from abandonment. This came from neglect. This came from sexual abuse, physical abuse, mental abuse, all types of abuse. And even though you're an adult now, you're a married woman, you are a mother, you're still bothered by this. So it tells us that all of these things don't necessarily go away.
Right. And I think for me, I try to understand, like, okay, what was the purpose of me going through all of that? And if not to fight against what happened, because children still go through this today. There's over 600,000 programs in the United States of America. That's not including the programs that are ran overseas by Americans. And children are still being taken away. Between 100,000 to 200, 120,000 children a year are kidnapped in the middle of the night, taken by strangers, dropped off in these places, and they're being abused. There are children dying. Um, and so I was like, you know what, this is still going on. Even though what happened to me was 20 years ago, I'm a lived experience of, hey, this kid's telling the truth. I went through the same thing. How could thousands of us with similar experiences say the same thing over and over again, and yet we are liars? I have better things to do with my life. I'm so bothered by this that I have taken time out of my own personal life to fight this, because it's that important.
And I don't see why any sane person would want to make a mockery out of this industry and pretend that they experienced something that they
Right.
didn't. Now, we do have some psychos out there. It's not like they don't exist. They do.
Right.
But this is something that you actually went through. You are very vocal about it on TikTok. And, you want people to understand not that you just went through the hurt, but that you overcame the hurt and that you're
Yes.
fighting against it. You are very knowledgeable of these types of abusive, industries that we don't pay any
Yeah.
attention
A
to.
lot of people don't know. I actually, a year ago, went to a Senate Finance Committee in Washington, D.C. I went to the Capitol. Paris Hilton's Team 1111 was there advocating. Several advocacy groups. One of the organizations that I actually work for, We Warned Them campaign, was there. Um, we had parents there who were advocating against it. Over 200 survivors came from all walks of life, all over, came to give their testimony and speak about the experience, and also tell senators, this is what we got, but this is what we needed instead. Let's start investing in community-based places. When you take a child out of its environment, put them in the middle of nowhere, and they're not given the skills to succeed, and then they get out of these places, you're setting them up for failure. you,
Completely.
it's shown, like, evidence-based programs that are community-based. A lot of these kids needed counseling, and honestly, and I'm going to say, and it's probably going to hurt some people's feelings, so I'm going to hold your hand with a napkin in between when I say this, folks.
Say it.
A lot of the problem is with the parents, and I say this as a mother who's raised two teenagers. I actually took a parenting course, and I think a lot of people think, like, parenting classes are for people who've lost custody of their kids. No, it's not. It's for people who have grew up in dysfunctional families, who came from divorced families, all kinds of walks of life. Maybe you didn't get loved enough as a child, and you want to make sure that you're given the right type of love. All I knew was punish, 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 punish. So I also did the same thing with my children, but just not to the extent of what was done to me. I was a progress book junkie. Oh, you got an F, take that phone away. And then come to find out, I was overreacting. The teacher just didn't up the grade yet in the book. And I'm like,
Wow.
okay, I'm obviously triggered by something in my own childhood that this is bringing this all out. So I took a parenting class called Triple P Parenting. It's free. It's an online class, and I learned how to use positive reinforcement. I use a behavior contract at home with my son. Okay, let's set a goal for yourself. I don't like how you're acting. How can we fix this? What can we do better? What are you going to do better? And then I hold him accountable to that. And so if I say I'm going to do something, he knows, okay, this is set in stone. Like, kids know, they need to know what to expect. And they also learn not only by what we say, but mainly by what we do.
You can say that again.
You have to model the behavior you want your child to see. So when I'm blowing up, getting mad at him, and then he's going off blowing up on kids at school, that's a direct, correlation with what he's getting at home.
And
I was a yelling mom.
absolutely, and it perpetuates.
Yeah.
From what you went through, your experience is causing you to parent in the way that was a reflection for you. Does he understand why you parent the way you do when it comes to punishment and things like that? Do they
Oh,
understand
they
what
do.
you
We
went through?
actually have open-ended conversations. My daughter, she's 19 now, and I tell my kids, like, hey, if I'm popping off at you, I'm wrong, call me out on it. Like, you know what I mean? I talk to my kids how I want to be talked to, and I didn't do that before. And so my daughter actually gives me feedback. Like, she'll be like, hey, don't stop doing that with Hunter. That actually really helped me. Even though he seems annoyed, keep doing that, mom. Like, you know what I mean? So my kids give me feedback, and my kids will
Right.
tell you, like, yeah, my mom was a yelling mom, but now, like, she's much calmer. Things are different. You know what I mean? Because you only kind of know what you were shown and taught as a child. So oftentimes parents kind of redo the same thing. And like my husband, he was abused as a child too by his second stepdad. And so he kind of, would be like the yelling parent and all those kinds of things. He would spank. And then for me, I didn't like spanking. It was very retriggering for me. And so it was a war in our home. So you have two parents who are emotionally immature, who have gone through abusive, situations at childhood, trying to parent and not knowing how to navigate parenting, and we weren't on the same page. And so I was like, look, homie, you need to get on the same page because this ain't working. And it's okay to change things. If something's not working, fix it. And I said, spanking is just making our son more aggressive. And he was like, you know what? You're right. And then I pulled up studies and he was like, oh my God, you're right. I said, you're angry, he's angry, and now y'all are having a big old dick swinging
Right.
contest with each other.
Right.
Testosterone's pumping. I was like, you need to be calmer. He's not going to be calm. I said, every time I had a parent or a, drill instructor in my face, it was like, oh, you want to fight? That's what you're doing to him every time you get in his face and you're yelling. And he's like, oh my God, you
I,
know?
yeah. And you know what, Sabrina? I agree with you because I think as parents, it's okay for us to unlearn and relearn. We tend to parent the way we were parented. And sometimes it's okay, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it
Right.
needs to be tweaked. Sometimes
Yep.
it needs to just be ended. Sometimes it needs to be redone altogether.
Right.
It's okay to do that, because we're so stuck in these mentalities that it's causing us to badly parent. Who
Yeah.
wants that? If you have a child and you want to parent your child in the most loving way, you're going to have to change some things, and
Yes.
that's okay. We can't always live by the narrative like, oh, this is how my parents did me.
Right.
They may
Doesn't make
not
it
want to
right
be
just
different.
because, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I took a parenting class. It literally changed my life because I was like, man, I'm kind of overcomplicating stuff. Like honestly, is the first reaction of when I was like, oh my God, I'm overcomplicating things, So like for
Yeah.
example, um my son would be playing video games and I would be like, okay, go take the trash out. And he'd be like, okay, mom. 20 minutes later, trash ain't taken out. Hey, I told you to go take out that trash and I'm now yelling, right?
Right.
I'm not a gamer, but my husband and my daughter is. And you some of these games that they play, you can't pause them. It's not like 1992 Sega. You can't do that with Fortnite. They have these matches and these battles. So then I was like, okay, compromise. I go in there. Hey, Hunter, make a connection. I never was taught that. Make a connection. Hey, man, this game looks pretty awesome. Yeah, mom. Hey, you think in about 20 minutes you can take that trash out for me? How long do you think you got in this battle? About 30 more minutes. Okay, I'll remind you in 30 minutes to take the trash out. Okay, mom. Go in there 30 minutes. Okay, buddy, you still in the game? I'm done, mom. All right, remember to take out that trash. When you're done, then you can go back on the game. Reasonable.
Right.
Reasonable. There was no need
Absolutely.
for me to like, you do this right now. Like I'm embarrassed
Yeah, because
at
I mean, not
myself.
not for nothing, but Sabrina, if you're gonna do it the other way, then just don't let him play the game at all.
Right.
But if you're gonna give him that privilege to play the game, let him play it.
Yeah.
Let him play the game. Um, Sabrina, so when you look at the troubled teen industry and its connection to adoption and or foster care, because the two are related, what do you mainly see?
So over 30% of the troubled teen industry is made up of foster care and rejected adoptees. It is also paid through taxpayers' funds, and I don't think a lot of people understand that your tax dollars are funding child abuse. There are subsidies that each state will give adoptive parents if they want these children to be taken and placed into these programs. They'll do subsidies, so if you cannot afford the tuition, they'll pay part of the tuition for you. And it's really just a warehousing to dump a bunch of children off that you don't want anymore. I actually met a kid a couple years ago that had just got out the troubled teen industry, and he had been in programs since he was 5. He got out at 18. I can't tell you how many sets of siblings I saw in my programs, and most of them were adoptive siblings. Um, there's what I also see is a lot of these siblings and kids of adoption came from white families. Again, back to that white savior complex. I had RAD, as a kid, or have RAD, so I had reactive attachment disorder, which is caused through trauma and abuse and neglect. And I could not bond with my abuser, obviously.
Yeah.
And so, or adoptive parent, but I say abuser because that's what she was. And so a lot of these adoptees already come from traumatic experiences, and then you're putting them in this program where it's even more traumatic, thinking like, oh, you just need to obey. And so it's like, I like to say this, it's like you can kick a dog over and over again, and yeah, eventually it's just going to listen to you, but it's out of fear, not because they respect you. Nothing really actually changed other than now you've traumatized.
Right.
And it's the same thing with children. And so a lot of us were in survival mode in these programs. And like I said in the beginning, going into my first program, I was like, I'm not going to hurt other kids. And by the time, and I'm ashamed to say this, by the time I left my last program, I was beating girls up. They would use, this is how the directors kept their hands clean. They would hire staff. Staff would then train kids to use attack therapy, to keep other kids in line. So say you have a new kid come in, they don't want to fall in line. Okay, everybody's in trouble. Now everybody's pissed off at the new person. And when staff aren't going to look, we're going to jump you because now we all had to get up out of bed at 3 o'clock in the morning and do calisthenics for 4 hours. Now we're mad. We're going to, bully you to get you to fall in line. And so I was holding girls down, beating girls up, getting into fights. And I've actually had to go find these women on social media and apologize. And for the majority of them were like, that I could find, were like, man, don't sweat it. We were literally surviving. You did what you thought you had to do, because they literally trained you. It was either you do this or we're going to do it to you. So I remember I would go assist. Like, we got one girl from another program and she was flying in, and we met her at the airport and they had me hold duct tape just to intimidate her. Like, hey, you try to run, we're going to duct tape you. We never had to use it. And what's crazy is she didn't realize till later on what that duct tape was for. And it wasn't until we got another set of new girls and we had the duct tape out, she's like, oh, that's what that was for. You know what I mean? So they did.
You to do the dirty work.
Yeah. So they would actually have like the girls or the boys, police the children or be like junior staff or leaders. We would give out demerits if you didn't do something right. Now, technically I wasn't a leader, but because I'd been there so long, they treated me like a leader and I had special privileges, but I had said over and over again, like, I don't want to be responsible for being a leader. I just don't want to. But I had natural leadership ability. But I also was doing bad things. I was teaching girls how to smoke cigarettes and not get caught. The last program I was in was probably the most liberal program. Like, it was still very religious, but we had a little bit more freedom. We traveled a lot more. We did a little bit more fun sightseeing things, but it was still abusive. They were still doing the same things that these other programs were doing. Just, you kind of had like perks with it. Like, we could wear makeup and nail polish and watch movies. So then we're thinking, oh, this isn't that bad. At least we can do this. But it really was.
Yeah.
And it was just a way to kind of like brainwash us.
Sabrina, when you look back now, obviously Miss Davis not only abused her kids, but it sounds like her husband was a part of that abuse that she had
Yes.
going on in her household. At any point, did you ever feel like you had any sort of resentment towards your biological mother? Because I know the story of what happened with your biological father. He didn't even know you existed. But as it relates to your biological mother, did you ever hold any resentment toward her?
Yes. I was told she was a drug addict. She was addicted to heroin and crack. And at the time, I just thought like, okay, because I was told she was 15 when she had me. That was not true. She was, I think our adopted mother either is she got the story mixed up or she just is a narcissistic liar. But her mother dropped her off at like a children's school on the weekends because you could do that back then and then pick them right back up. And she got tired of being dropped off. And so she ran away, got picked up by a pimp at 15, then wound up getting hooked on drugs and then, having all these babies, back to back to back and, choosing a life of drugs. So I actually had deep hatred for drug addicts and I would judge them very badly. And I thought like, oh, they're all pieces of shit. So what if they die or overdose? Like, I wasn't informed. And so I had this deep hatred and I was like, I'm never using drugs. And so I had this mentality that I was better than everybody because of that. And life humbled me real quick because I started dating somebody who was using drugs. And at the time, I didn't know he was using drugs. I just thought like, oh, he's 20, he likes to party, he gets drunk and smokes weed a little bit. And then I found out he was using other drugs recreationally. And when I got pregnant, I was like, look, you got to stop this, dude. Like, we can't, no. And he did. He's the only man I know that's cold turkey be able to just stop things. He wanted getting on the fire department, getting his CDLs, completely changing his life around. It was war for the first 6 years of our relationship. Like, if I could go back and tell 18-year-old Sabrina anything, because I would never try to encourage another woman to stay in a toxic relationship just for the sake of it might get better, he might change. But I'm one of the lucky few that he did change. And that's because he wanted to change and he wanted to be better than what his parents were. And we just didn't know what a healthy relationship looked like. So we would just,
But he's your husband today, right?
yeah, we've been married for 14 years, been together for 20, have two beautiful kids. So
So, and then because of that,
it kind of changed my view
right,
on drugs. And then I was like, oh, this heifer's using this to drown out what he went through, all these other things, like, you know what I mean? And then I started learning from other people, like, and I started actually watching the show Intervention, and every show it led back to trauma. No one wakes up and says, I'm gonna be a crackhead today.
I say it all the time. And the thing
It's
is,
trauma.
I heard someone, or rather, I saw a post under a video comment. I don't know what it was, but someone said trauma. We always think it's marijuana, but someone said trauma is the gateway drug.
It is. Trauma is the gateway to drugs. It's not
Trauma
marijuana.
is the gateway drug. And in that moment when I read that, I was like, oh, it made me see things differently because I was like, it's like you said, and I say the same thing. No one wakes up like, let me go smoke some crack today.
Right.
I'm gonna try crack and then I'm gonna try heroin. That's not how it works. It's usually something traumatic that someone has experienced that causes them to cope with it. And
Yes. Because they're not
like
taught
you
the
said,
proper coping skills, and
absolutely
they were not ever taught that. And so this is how they cope. Or maybe they can't afford therapy.
right,
And so for them, drowning out their sorrows with a bottle of liquor or, a hit of this or that is them coping. And
right.
that's sad. And I think if, we actually got to the root of the problem, which none of these programs did, none of the staff knew that I had been abused. Like, you know what I mean? They all just like, well, your parents sent you here for a reason. You were a bratty kid. And I was like, no, I wasn't. But because I was mouthy, and I would talk right back to you, because you was not going to talk to me any type of way. Like, I'm going to talk to you like a dog if you're going to talk to me. I'm still that way. I'm not the bigger person. I
Yeah.
take it to the depths of hell. Like, like play with your kitty, not me, because I'm not the one.
Right, right.
Yeah.
I mean,
So,
hey,
and they will say, "Yo, you haven't changed." That is my personality. I'm not going to let you talk to me some type of way and gaslight me. I'm not 12 years old. I'm almost 40 years old. I know what happened to me,
right.
So a lot of these programs that I went to 5. They got shut down, but I went to Charity Haven first for 3 months. Then I went to Bethel Boys and Girls Academy for a little over a year. And then all of a sudden, I'm told, hey, pack your bags. Your dad's picking you up. And I'm like, what? And I didn't get letters and phone calls like the other girls. So I was really shocked. And so my adoptive father comes and picks me up. I'm home for 3 months. I come home from school. My aunt has my bags packed the week after my mother passed away. She died when I was 13, and sends me back to Bethel, locks my dad in a mental institution, sells our childhood home and everything. And I go back to Bethel. Um, and I find out at 14, you have no home to go to. So you might as well just do right in the program. And I'm like, okay. So I work my way up through the levels to get on what's called night watch, which is where you make sure that nobody runs away and that the dorm don't catch on fire. And you got special privileges, like we got to drink coffee and watch TV after we did our list of chores, and we did our schoolwork at night, and then we got to sleep during the day. And I worked my way up to be on night watch so I could get the keys and run away. And so I did. I ran away from Bethel twice. The first time I was 12, and that was after they made me pick cotton. And I was like, and at first, I was compliant. I was doing it, and out there stupidly singing Spice Girl songs to try to get through it. Like, music was my way of coping. And I was out there for about 12 hours, and I was like, ain't nobody watching. And I just ran. And, I ran through the woods, and I remember going to Walmart thinking, okay, I need to ditch these clothes because I was in a, blue Navy uniform. I'm going to stick out like a sore thumb, and I see the Bethel van pull up, and I'm like, crap. So I hide in a ditch. And when I did, a car drove by, and this old man goes, "Are you from that one school?" And I said, "Yes." He goes, "Do you need some help?" And I was very hesitant of getting in the car with him, but I was like, "Can you please take me to the police station so I can report abuse? They're having us like pick cotton and stuff out there." And I get in the vehicle, and he locked the door. And as soon as that car door locked, I knew how I had messed up. He drove me right back to Bethel. When I got when he got off the vehicle and drove up to Herman Fountain's house, he handed him like an envelope. And I'm pretty sure there was money in that. He had neighbors, judges, other people in the town of Lucedale paid. They knew what was going on. This program ran for 30 years, and they knew the abuse that was going on because so many people ran away. It had been shut down. It was allowed to reopen. There's been a documentary about it. There's been news coverage. Barbara Walters covered Bethel Boys and Girls Academy. So, it just kind of got swept under the rug, and religious exemption, helped them to be able to stay open, separation of church and state. So, I pretty much was there for a year and a half, go home, come back, run away. I ran with two other girls. They left me at a laundromat. I fell asleep and I woke up and they were gone. And I was scared, so I called Bethel to come pick me back up because I didn't know my way around. I'm 13, never really had ran away other than that one time at 12. So I wasn't very smart on it. And I remember having to stand in the corner for weeks, like weeks, eating my food, standing up. And CPS had came in because they found those two girls and they wanted to check it out. And the woman asked, she's walking past the hall in the dining room, and they're going to walk to the barracks. And she goes, "How long has she been standing in there?" And he goes, "Oh, 2 hours." And I said, "Try 2 weeks." Literally after I had said that, like a couple of days later, they're like, "Hey, you're going to go with us to Lucedale to the boys' property, go pick up supplies." So I get in this van. There's no seats. Staff is driving, and one of the leaders is in the passenger seat, and she keeps looking back at me, and I knew something was wrong. And I'm like, "Oh man, I messed up. They're probably going to send me to Tranquility Bay in Jamaica. I've done it now." But it wasn't Tranquility Bay. They wound up sending me back to the program that kicked me out. It had closed down and rebranded and relocated to another state, North Carolina. And I was like, "Oh, this is going to be fun. Like, how stupid are you to send me back to a program I literally gave you hell at?" And I'm older now. So imagine how much more brattier I probably was.
Right.
And so I go to this program. It gets shut down. State comes in. My aunt comes and picks me up, drives me back down from North Carolina to Milton, Florida, back to Charity Haven. There's no girls, just me and this old lady. So I was giving her hell. I'm not going to lie. I was smacking her in the face and all these kinds of things. Because you ain't beating me with no curtain rod. Like, you ain't beating me. Yeah. So they call my sister in as backup. And so I'm mad, like, "You're 19 years old. Why aren't you trying to get me out of these programs? And you're just letting them do this to me." And I didn't know it, but it was at the time they were putting me in holding because they were wanting to put me in the Rebecca home for girls, but they had just got shut down by the state of Texas for child abuse. Faye and Wiley Cameron, the Camerons took over for Lester Roloff after he died in 1982 in a plane crash with 4 other girls. And they took over the program, and Faye Cameron got charged with child abuse and was banned with working with children. So he asked Bill and Jen McNamara, who had ran the Victory Acres Girls Home with Dave Walkden, because Dave Walkden was old as shit, so he needed muscle power. And they were dorm parents. And after they, lost their job with that in Texas, they wanted, in Alice, Texas, they wanted going to Corpus Christi and taking over the Rebecca home. Well, they had to relinquish over 90 girls, and he fled with the rest of them to Missouri. And they picked me up. I woke up to girls singing and him having handcuffs and shackles saying, "We can do this the easy way or the hard way." And I wound up getting sent to the Rebecca Home for Girls. It rebranded as New Beginnings Girls Academy. And we were in Devil's Elbow, Missouri at a boys' school called Thanks to Calvary Boys Academy. until he was able to relocate and find, final property. And so we were there for a few months. And then we wound up moving to Pace, Florida, which is the final, place where they were like, this is going to be the girls' school while I was there. So out of all the programs I went to, I'll say that Bethel and then the New Beginnings Girls Academy was probably the worst out of all five of them. They would use food and sleep deprivation as ways to get you to conform. I was forced to stand at attention at the end of my bunk bed from 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. as a way to break me down. They were trying to sleep deprive me. I would still find ways to fall asleep, like in school or at church, but I would get punished for it. But this went on for a matter of like 2 to 3 months. My shower privileges were taken away from me. I wasn't allowed to shower at all. I wasn't allowed to brush my teeth. My mattress, I was only allowed to have a sheet of plastic on it, no pillow, no blanket, because he didn't want me stinking up the mattress. He would come in and do mandatory finger sniff checks to make sure girls were not masturbating. He would come in, call us harlots, whores. He would make fun of me for smelling bad because I wasn't allowed to shower. And it got to the point where I couldn't even wipe myself because my hair had clotted so bad from menstruation and not being able to shower. I was like, please, please let me shower. And he's like, I asked my wife and she says that doesn't happen. I said, so you do this to your wife? Like, do you punish her and abuse her? And he admitted that he spanked his own wife when she got out of line.
Okay.
So
Wait,
I stole, sorry.
I know. I'm sorry. I just need a second. That was
Okay.
too much. I was, and I'm listening to you, and as you're saying that you were outside for 12 hours, and I'm listening to the amount of times that you've been moved from one place to another, from one state to another. This stuff still happens today. And then you mean to tell me that they took away your sleeping privileges, which your body naturally needs. They took away your bathing privileges, which your body naturally needs. So much that you had to, that is disgusting.
They would put
These
us on
people don't
half
even care.
portions. If he thought you were fat or overweight, he'd put you on half portions. So by the time I left the program, I had a full blown eating disorder. And, I sit there and I get so angry because I'm like, all these men that told us we were fat, they were fat. How did I let a 40-year-old overweight man tell me about my body? Like, look at you,
These people are disgusting, Sabrina.
glutton. Like,
They,
you
these,
know,
these people are disgusting.
very.
I, I, I wonder where they are today.
Oh, I could tell you because I stalk them.
Mm,
Yes, ma'am, I sure do. Because some of them are trying to reopen programs and you ain't going to do that. Yeah.
what?
So Bill and Jen McNamara closed the program, sold it to Steve Blankenship. It was renamed Marvelous Grace Girls Academy. I actually helped get that program shut down because it relocated to Duck Hill, Mississippi. An investigator from Mississippi seen my TikTok and called me and asked me about the programs, and I led him to other girls who had went to Marvelous Grace to get it shut down, and they shut that down.
Good for you.
But Bill and Jen McNamara own a turkey farm out in Texas, I believe.
For the
They're
first
raising
time in my
turkeys.
life, even
It's
though it's
either
not,
Texas or Missouri. I forget where they're at, but it's one of the two. They're raising turkeys, a
but
turkey
see,
farm.
that's the thing. I'm a carnivore, right? I am a meat eater. I like chicken, turkey. But for the first time in my life, I feel sorry for those turkeys.
Right?
I've never felt that way with some gravy. But for the first time in my life, I feel sorry for those turkeys, for those living. Oh my God. These people are inhumane. They don't need to be around any living species
Animals,
at
let
all.
alone children. Yeah.
Right.
Jack Patterson is still a street preacher. He actually had to change his name on Facebook because I had an interview with a reporter from iPaper in the UK that was obviously probably calling and asking, and he didn't want to, have give a rebuttal. And so he changed his name to Gordon Patterson on Facebook. He is still street preaching and is dropping hints of wanting to restart his program. He has a men's program. So a lot of these people work with adults now. They were working with adults and children, but because they tarnished their name so bad with kids, they're just solely working with adults. So Herman Fountain has City of Refuge in Lucedale, Mississippi. He's working with adult men. Trudy Allred, the woman that ran Reclamation Ranch for Jack Patterson, the girls' side. She's living in squander. Actually, one of the girls that went to the program with me is her neighbor. She wound up staying in Alabama, and she lives in squander. Is in with a felon. You know, not the Christian woman that we thought she was in, you know, the programs, obviously. Um, a lot of them are, you know, still thinking that they did what was best for us, and they did not. They don't even want to. They want apologies because I know they see my videos. I literally was tagging them. I want you to see what I'm saying. Let's argue about it because I got nothing but facts. You can't argue with the facts.
Right.
You know, so they don't normally say anything back, but you know, they'll talk to other girls and be like, "Oh, other girls owe us an apology." No, I don't, and I'm not going to apologize for speaking up and telling the truth because the children you abuse today turn into adults tomorrow, and we're going to take
Right.
you down.
And
Even if I don't get the, even if like I know it's like time barred with, you know, child abuse,
right.
I just want to prevent and educate parents on these are wolves in sheep's clothing. They care about money. It's a $27 billion industry.
Industry for a fact.
If you're willing to put a second mortgage on your home to get your child help, but you have to send them away to do it, you're not doing it because you want to really help your child. You're doing it because you literally just don't know how to
Right.
think outside the box. You know, so maybe try therapy and actual counseling. You have to be careful with therapists too, because a lot of these therapists recommend these programs.
Yeah.
Stay away from behavioral educational consultants because they also get kickbacks for referring these children to these places. You know what I mean? Listen to survivors' experiences. We've done the research and the homework for you. There's so much information on the internet today between so many different nonprofit organizations and survivors telling you the red flags of what to look out for. If you're not allowed to contact your child, if your child, the punishments are, you know, cutting them off from food, sleep deprivation, all these, those are red flags. You know, a lot of these places have fancy brochures and marketing schemes, and the programs ran nothing like how they're advertising. And parents really need to do their due diligence before even consider taking a parenting class first,
Yeah.
honestly.
I agree because this behavior is disgusting. Like it's hurting me
This,
to my stomach to know that
I'm
these kids.
sorry.
Oh, no, no, no. It's okay. I'm glad that you said that because again, it brings awareness, and
It's
we
a
need
heavy
to raise.
topic.
Right, absolutely. We need to raise awareness for these types of things because we don't talk about it enough. And when we look at the fact that, like you stated, this all happens with people who we think we can trust, and then and in a lot of cases, it starts with adoption and foster care, like the adoption industry and the foster care industry. So, Sabrina, when you before I let you go, when you think about the foster care industry and the adoption industry and the fact that they can only function based on the decisions, not only because a lot of times children are taken, but they function a lot of times based on the decision of the biological family. What do you say to those families ready to
One of
go?
the first questions they ask mothers is the father involved? My mother was able to say no and lie and put
Mm.
me up for adoption without my father's, you know, permission. And so that opportunity was stolen from us. Even if he couldn't have took me in, I had a grandmother and aunts that said, if we'd known you existed, we would have took you. I'm so sorry. My name was changed. So my biological mother named me after my dead sister, Renisha. So my name was Renisha Renee. And that was actually shocking finding that out. Like, you had to name me after the dead kid. Like, you couldn't even give me my own name. And she's like, I missed Renisha so much that I named you after her. And I said, well, you couldn't have missed her that much or you wouldn't have put me up for adoption. So, yeah. And so, you know, your identity is lost. You know, imagine being the only person that you know that you're related to in the world. That is what that is like. Your identity is stolen, your medical information, all these things about you, not knowing where you get your characteristics, mannerisms. And so I feel like kinship adoption should be the first step to adoption. If you're going to choose adoption, and you need to make sure you're doing mental health screenings on these individuals before placing them in the care. the child in the care with them, because we later on found out that our adoptive mother was schizophrenic bipolar, which is very dangerous unchecked, which makes sense on one day I was her sweet Suzie Q, and the next day I was nothing but a little nigger baby. And that makes sense why she was going back and forth.
Right.
So then I have this trauma of being loved, not loved, loved, not
Yeah.
loved. And then so for me, I would do anything I could to get that love. I would clean. She'd have me rub her feet, her anything I could to get that affection and that attention. And that's not healthy for children.
No, of course.
Um, I was not raised in my culture. I felt even awkward around Black people growing up because in the 90s, being biracial was like having leprosy. I wasn't accepted by the Black community, nor was I accepted by the white community. So I didn't know where I fit in or where I belonged, or like I always had to pick a side. But being biracial gave me this whole different sense of how I view the world,
Yeah.
not in black and white. And so I understand things from the Black community, but I also understand things from the white community. And I see people for people. You know, I
Right.
don't see like, you know what I mean? I see you for who you are and what you went through. Like, but I'm not going to sit there and act like I don't see what the Black community is going through, and I'll advocate for that. But then when I do, people from the white community will tear me down for it.
Right.
And yes, my father is white, my husband is white, but that doesn't mean that I'm not a Black woman, and I'm not going to talk about the injustices Black people face today. And
Absolutely.
neither is my husband. Don't get it twisted, because he's white, but he ain't that white. Like, he'll tell you all day long,
He's
like,
white, but he ain't white.
yeah, that's what he said. He's like, yeah, he ain't that type of white.
Right. These are the things, and that's why I'm so glad that you're so vocal on this issue, because we don't know enough. Like when it's all said and done, Sabrina, we don't know enough. Like speaking to you, you just educated me. And I mean, the thing is, we hear about group homes, but we don't make the connection that these group homes or these safe houses are a connection to wealth. That's all
Yes.
it is. It benefits the adults that
The,
are involved and not the kids. And so I hate that this was your lived experience, but I love that you are vocal about it. And I thank you so much, because there's so much to your story. There's so much more to the stories that we have not heard. And I
yeah.
really want everyone to throw out your handle. I really want everyone to know where they can hear more about what you went through and why it is that you're so passionate and so vocal on this topic. So please give us your handles.
All right. So my handles on TikTok is Hot Girl Advocate. And I'm on Instagram, which is Hot Girl Advocate 87. And I'm also on Facebook, Sabrina Young. I have 2 books that I'm currently working on that I'm writing. One is about the adoption experience and me reunificating with my biological family. I was able to take an ancestry DNA test and find both sides of my family. So I talk about that. And then I have another book coming out that's talking about my parenting journey. It's called Chronicles of a Canna Mom. And the other book is called Dear Renisha. So be on the lookout. Those should be out by next year. So
So that means this is not our last conversation.
no, ma'am.
Okay, because we are going to, and just for the sake of time, we're going to end
Right.
here. But we are going to come back, and we're going to come back with more, because again, there's so much more, and you just can't
Yes.
cover it in this short amount of time. So, but girl, I thank you so much, because this was good, and this is needed. We have to know about this before we just throw our children in the system, and before we just accept a child, and before we don't even know the story of a child, just toss them around like they are nothing.
Right.
They are not a nothing. We are human beings. We are people. We have family. We should be loved, and we should be able to do that and walk through life regardless of our shade of skin or how curly our hair is or whatever, and be accepted in the spaces that we're invited into. And I mean, to know that you were invited into a home, but they're not accepted and abused. Okay, thank you, Sabrina. We're gonna make sure y'all go follow her, y'all listen to her story, y'all get in her DM. It might take a while for her to respond, but she's going to get to you. And I thank you so much, girl.